Depeche Mode, Violator. Probably the most outstanding electronic album of all times, in my opinion. But of course, I'm not alone in thinking that. There is so much to unpack about this album, and I've spoken about it in so much detail. But one of the things that really blew my mind, amongst a lot of things about this record, was when I realized that the vocals, Dave Gahan's lead vocal on this album, were recorded using a Shure SM57. Let's talk about that. Hello and welcome to Geek Talk, where we talk deep and geek about pianos, keyboards, synthesizers, and music production. Wow, these are frosty. I've not done a Geek Talk video in quite a long time, so I thought it's time to get to it. As part of the Depeche Mode album review series, I interviewed Pino Pischetola. Now, Pino Pischetola was one of the engineers on the production of the Violator album. He did the engineering alongside Flood when they worked on the album in Milan. And the interview I did with Pino was one of the favorites. It was a fan favorite, a subscriber favorite. His memory and his recollection was so good. He could remember intricate details as if though he had recorded this album yesterday. And that interview was a real hit with you guys. Now, Pino shared so many interesting stories, nuggets of wisdom. But what I want to really focus in today was when Pino told me in that interview that the vocals were recorded on an SM57. Dave's vocals. Let's roll the clip for context.
I mean, the songs in that record in the studio in Milano were recorded with a Shure SM57, really? $100 microphone. Yes.
What the vocals to Violator were done on a Shure SM57?
Yes, and no. And most of them in the control room with the speaker very loud.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so can I just say, because you get the SM58, yeah, and then
57,
you get the
57.
Yeah, well, usually the SM58 is like the industry standard vocal mic
for vocals. Yes.
Yeah, but the 57 is more for instruments.
I mean, what I think was mainly the difference is that the 58 capsule, it's made because of for not to get too close to the capsule. So it's like a protection, and there is also some foam inside for the breath and
like a wind pop shield.
Yeah, wind exactly. But with the 57, if you put a wind screen on top of it, it's the same. But what I was saying is that Flood, before choosing the 57, asked me how many 57 you have in the studio, and I say 5 or 6, and he say bring it all here, and he choose one by one which one was sounding better,
because there are slight differences between which only he can hear. Hear. Wow.
So we are talking a cheap microphone, but he will choose the best cheap microphone to record this.
Pino, can I just say, my mind, sorry guys, I'm a geek. My mind is absolutely blown because, I know a little bit about microphones. I know we get the SM58, which is like the industry standard, which is, that's an 8. But the SM57 I've known is typically an instrument mic, for miking up drums and stuff. So I just want to say this again. Violator was recorded the vocals were recorded on an SM57.
Yeah.
In the control room.
Yes, with loudspeakers.
So that means if you listen to the vocal takes, there's going to be a lot of spill in the background.
Yeah, but also because Dave has this loud voice.
Yeah.
With the gate, when he's singing loud on the microphone, it's like the microphone is compressing everything else. So when he's actually singing, you don't hear much spill. You hear it
because the
when
gate
he's not singing.
Yeah.
It's then with the gate, you fix this thing. So when he's not singing, the gate closes, and when he's singing, it's loud enough to cover outside the spill. So it was not really a problem.
Wow. My mind is absolutely blown, because I would have thought they would have probably used something like a Neumann UA87 or you know.
We tried it. I mean, we tried this approach with the Neumann in the recording room with the monitor, the headphone, and everything, but the performance was not half as good. Because Dave, you know, is a performer, and when he was in the control room with this microphone, I mean, in my experience, it happened to a lot of singers. That when they sing without thinking, they sing better than.
So when they were in the control room singing, did they have headphones on, or no? Just through the
speakers. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So you could see by my sheer fanboy reaction there, I was like, what, an SM57? Okay, so what is an SM57? An SM57 is a dynamic microphone, and it is made by a company called Shure. Now, if you're a musician, engineer, producer, you will know the Shure brand. You know, they make great vocal mics. I must just say, this is not a product endorsement. I'm not paid to say this. But, you know, Shure do make really, really good mics. Now, let's just move slightly off topic for the purpose of context here. There is a industry standard microphone called the Shure SM58. Now, the Shure SM58 has long been called the sort of industry standard vocal mic. It's an inexpensive mic. It's been around for, oh my God, I think since the 60s. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been around for a long time. And it's an inexpensive rock and roll mic typically. And the reason why so many bands use the SM58 is because it's like what they call a workhorse. You know, you use it on the road, it can take the beating of being, you know, on loud stages every night and touring. It just handles really, really well. It's not typically a studio mic. It's not typically what you would record, you know, your vocals on for a record. It's a very, very good mic. Now, here's an interesting tip which you may not be aware of. Gary Newman, when he recorded his Sacrifice and Exile albums, I believe he recorded on an SM58. And that was due to the fact that he had no money at the time. It was done on a budget. That does not mean you cannot use an SM58 in the studio. Now, why am I talking about the SM58? Because Dave Gahan's vocals were recorded onto an SM57. There's a reason for that. You'd think if they were going to use an inexpensive mic, you would think they would rather use the SM58, because the SM58 it's a vocal mic. There are similarities between the SM57 and the SM58. They're both dynamic mics. The main difference is really the frequency response. The SM58 typically has sort of like a peak in the higher frequency range, which is more tailored for vocals, whereas the SM57 has a more flat frequency response, and it's typically more for, you know, it's more neutral, so it's more for lower instruments, and very typically and often it's used to record drums. Now, this is where my mind was blown, is that first of all, it's an inexpensive mic, and it's not the mic you would associate with vocal recording. Listening to Violator, and with all the sort of enigma we have around the record, we would have assumed that it was recorded on the best microphone in the world. Something like Neumann U87, which is a very, very expensive condenser mic. But here we go. Dave's vocal was recorded on a Beta 57. Now, the reason that is so mind-blowing is because, first of all, it's not an expensive mic. It's very affordable. And it's typically not a vocal mic, although you can record vocals on it. It's just not typically associated with the recording of vocals. When you've looked up to Depeche Mode, as I have all my life and still do, and referenced the Violator album as a masterpiece, and then realized that the vocal was done on an inexpensive dynamic microphone, which is typically not even used for vocals, now you can see why my mind was absolutely blown by this news. Now, having said that, with what I've learned on my journey so far, I'm not that surprised anymore. I released a video a while ago on my Geek Talk series here, which was called The Professionals Don't Care, and Nor Should You. A somewhat inflammatory title, I suppose. But what I was trying to say was, I've been really blessed to meet some really, really good producers, famous producers, producers I've looked up to who are now friends of mine. And what they all have in common is that they don't sort of sweat the small stuff. In that video, I sort of elaborated and I spoke about how we, the sort of project studios and stuff, how we really look up to our heroes and we just assume that they use the best of everything. And that's not entirely true. You often see these recording studios on Instagram and things where it's like so pristine and like a spaceship. And the reality is that a lot of records, you know, a lot of great records that we look up to were not made in environments like that. They were not created in perfect environments. My point being, as I discuss with a lot of my students, is there is a whole industry created upon your ignorance, your so-called inability to do things properly. Your records don't sound good because you're not using this microphone. Your records don't sound good because you don't have acoustic foam in the walls. Now, there are certain measures that you need to put into place to make it, you know, to make your working environment more professional. But the reality is you do not need all this over-the-top high-end stuff. And there are so many countless examples, which I can't go into in this video, where I would hear a story of a certain song, you know, that I rate as a brilliant song, and when I heard how it was recorded or how it was done, you'd be like, really? Really? An example that comes to mind now was the recording of Depeche Mode's Home. Martin Gore sang that on a handheld vocal mic, and he did it in one take. In the control room, he wasn't even in a vocal booth. And we'll do a video on that. Gareth Jones will tell us how he did that, because Gareth Jones, I believe, was involved in the recording of Home. I think he was the vocal engineer, if I'm not mistaken. But you don't need all this expensive gear to make great records. You just need to know what you're doing. So we have gone a little bit off topic there. I think what I wanted you to take away from this video is, you know, if you're making records or you're an up-and-coming producer, you should not focus too much on the gear. Focus more on the ideas and the implementation of those and the vibe. That is so much more important. I see so many records these days in forums and stuff, and things are so much focused on the production and you don't really hear much talk about, you know, performance and implementation and things like that. And these are things that are very, very important. And a lot of the great records, like for instance Connie Plank, who worked with Ultravox, you know, if you go back and listen to those albums technically and critically, they're not sonically brilliant, you know, compared to some sonically brilliant albums, I suppose. But that doesn't mean they're not great records, because the vibe is there. And now I'm going really off topic. I want to hear from you now, my friend. Are you a producer? Are you an up-and-coming producer? Let me know what level you're at and give me your opinion. What did you think when you realized Dave Gahan's vocals were recorded for Violator on an SM57? Did that blow your mind as well or not? As always, my friend, I'm very grateful for your support. A lot more coming. Check out my Depeche Mode hub. You can also sign up to watchvg.com if you want to become a VG local, and you can see all my content in depth without interruptions. And by being part of that community, you can also help support my work here and also be a part of live streams and other cool things. So thank you very much for your time as always. I'll see you in the next video. Lots of love. Adios.